Hey guys, tonight we're about to tumble headfirst into one of history's most exclusive family group chats, the British royal family. But this isn't your usual crown and scepter bedtime story. No, tonight we're exploring what happened when Europe's most powerful families decided the dating pool was their own family tree. Welcome to what inbreeding did to England's royal daughters. An evening of royal misadventure, medical oddities, and more double cousins than a small-town wedding in a Hallmark movie. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that white noise, and get as comfortable as possible. But let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it's like to have more titles than teeth? Did royal daughters ever get to marry for love, or just for a slightly different flavor of cousin? How many generations does it take before the royal family tree just loops back on itself like a medieval family-sized pretzel? Did anyone ever question if marrying your uncle was just a little too convenient? How does it feel to wake up one morning and realize your chin now has its own postal code? What's it like knowing your marriage certificate is also your genetic risk assessment? Is the family crest just a picture of a closed gene pool? And, the most important, could you survive a day as a royal daughter in the era of dynastic chess, where your main job is to marry strategically, look decorative, and try not to die of mysterious, extremely preventable ailments? Congratulations! You've just woken up in the year 1690. The air smells like unwashed velvet, the candles are made of tallow, and your future husband is, statistically speaking, probably your cousin. Welcome to Royal England, where the wigs are huge, the bloodlines are questionable, and the family drama is chronic. Now let's talk about what happens next. You arrive in the world with an audience of courtiers, a royal wet nurse, and a genealogical chart that looks suspiciously circular. The palace midwife glances at your nose and jots down a note. Family resemblance, strong. Jawline, already concerning. Welcome to the only nursery where your first rattle is a family tree. Let's set the scene. The year is 1690. The nursery walls are draped with expensive tapestries, mostly to keep out the English damp and the family secrets. There's a faint scent of lavender mixed with odor-boiled cabbage and a lingering note of powdered wigs. The candles flicker, illuminating the proud faces of 3 generations of relatives, all of whom, inconveniently, look exactly like you. Congratulations, you're the newest model in a limited edition line. Your mother, Queen something or other, is radiant, exhausted, and quietly judging your nose against her own. The king enters, peers at you with one eye, the good one, and declares you a fine little Windsor. Somewhere in the background, your grandmother is already planning your marriage. She's just waiting for the family priest to calculate how many cousins are legal this season, before you're even out of swaddling. Your attributes are scrutinized with more intensity than a modern-day royal birth live stream. The nurse notes your ears, your toes, and, most critically, your jaw. Is it pronounced? She whispers. Not yet, replies the midwife. But give it time. A royal jaw, after all, is a family heirloom. Handed down like the family china, only much harder to store. Your first days are spent under the constant supervision of the court physician, whose greatest medical achievement is surviving long enough to see 3 different royal babies with 3 of his own experimental tonics. He prescribes you a mixture of goat's milk, crushed pearls, and hope. Every time you cough, a distant relative faints. Every time you sneeze, a courtier writes a letter to Vienna. The line is secure, the nose is promising. But being born royal isn't all luxury swaddling and commemorative coins. The palace is chilly, the draft sneaks in through every tapestry, and your cradle is so gilded it squeaks every time you move, ensuring you're never left alone for more than 30 seconds. Privacy isn't a right, it's a theoretical concept. Even your earliest lullabies are performed by a nervous harpsichordist and a choir of aunts with matching underbites. There are more nurses, nannies, and governesses than you can count, all tasked with keeping you alive, healthy, and presentable for the inevitable portrait session. No pressure. But your infant brow is already being measured for an eventual crown, and someone is probably documenting your first yawn for posterity. In fact, by the end of your first week, your every gurgle has already been misinterpreted as a sign of intelligence, piety, or a troubling resemblance to Great Uncle Rupert. The family doctor will inevitably bring up the matter of the jaw. He assures everyone that the swelling will go down, or, failing that, history will be kind. You are prodded, measured, and, occasionally, paraded around for visiting dignitaries who peer into your bassinet, offer their opinions, and then send letters home with the phrase, "Same as the father's side, but perhaps a touch more chin." Outside the palace, rumors fly faster than a royal baby in a perambulator. The people gossip about your health, your name, and whether or not you'll inherit the infamous family disposition. Will you be bookish? Will you be bossy? Will you ever be allowed to eat a vegetable not boiled beyond recognition? The town criers add a flourish. A new princess is born, with every sign of royal blood, and a jaw that will surely command armies. As you doze off for your royal nap, 4 footmen stationed by the door in case you need anything. You are blissfully unaware of the expectations, the crown, the court, the looming family portraits. But you are, above all, exactly what the family hoped for, a new branch on a tree that never quite learns how to branch. And so you drift off, soothed by the knowledge that here in the palace, it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the chinniest. Your earliest playmates are siblings, second cousins, and the occasional alarming parrot. Toys are made of ivory and gilt. You're swaddled in fine lace, which is great, except it makes your eczema flare up, another family tradition. It's morning in the royal nursery. Sunlight barely filters through the thick velvet curtains, not so much to protect you from the elements, but to shield the neighbors from witnessing a scene that can best be described as controlled hereditary chaos. Your siblings and cousins toddle around, each one displaying varying degrees of regal forehead and matching weak chin. The family resemblance is so strong that even the servants sometimes struggle to tell you apart, which is only a problem when it comes to doling out the good bread. The royal nursery is less a place of innocence, more a showroom for the latest model of the House of Hanover, Habsburg, or whatever dynasty happens to be trending that century. The staff is a carefully curated lineup. Nursemaids from France, governesses from Austria, and tutors who look vaguely traumatized by the challenge of teaching basic arithmetic to a child with 5 titles before breakfast. Playtime is a cross between a diplomatic summit and an anxiety dream. You roll a wooden hoop across the parquet floor, only to have it intercepted by your cousin, who is also, confusingly, your godparent and maybe your future fiancé. Nobody's quite sure. The family tree in the nursery is more of a tangled hedge, lovingly watered with centuries of careful inbreeding. And if you're bored with your blood relatives, there's always the parrot, who's picked up more gossip in a month than the average courtier learns in a lifetime. One squawk of mama's jaw, and someone's getting exiled. The toys are beautiful, if not especially fun. Ivory rattles, silver bells, and hand-painted chess sets, because nothing says childhood like learning the importance of sacrificing pawns. Each plaything comes with its own strict rules. No throwing, no chewing, and for heaven's sake, don't let the dog get it, unless you want a long lecture from the Duchess about family heirlooms and the digestive habits of spaniels. Your days are governed by the ancient rhythm of tutors and lessons. There's French before breakfast, nobody really learns it, Latin after lunch, everyone pretends to be interested, and religious instruction somewhere in between. The tutors hover around, armed with wax tablets, quill pens, and an unshakable sense of futility. You're quizzed on genealogy for sport, name all your great-grandparents, and if you get stuck, just say the Duke. Statistically, you'll be right. When it comes to manners, nothing is left to chance. You are taught how to curtsy without falling over, how to smile without showing too many teeth, and how to greet your cousin with just the right amount of enthusiasm. Enough for diplomacy, not enough to start rumors. If you spill your soup, 3 governesses leap into action, dabbing at your lace bib and whispering, "It's all right, darling. We'll blame it on the Spanish side." And then there's nap time, which is strictly enforced, not because anyone cares about your rest, but because the staff desperately needs a break from wrangling tiny blue-blooded whirlwinds. You're tucked into a cradle stuffed with lavender, dreams, and the underlying terror of catching whatever mystery rash is currently making its way through the family. Siblings squabble over blankets, while in the corner, the parrot mutters, "God save the Queen," just to keep everyone on their toes. The walls are decorated with portraits of ancestors glaring down at you, as if daring you to misbehave. If you're especially unlucky, you're assigned to share your nap with a baby sibling who already has a reputation for biting. Family traditions, after all, start early. But for all the tutors, teething, and tiny family trees, there's a strange sort of comfort in the routine. Every day is a swirl of etiquette, education, and hereditary skin conditions, a perfect preparation for your future as a royal chess piece on the great board of European politics. In the royal nursery, you learn early. Life is full of rules, cousins, and lace, and the best you can do is smile sweetly, stay upright, and try not to eat the chess pieces. It's a royal education, one eczema patch at a time. You're painted by the finest artists in Europe, all quietly instructed to soften the jaw. The result? A collection of portraits that look more like hopeful propaganda than people. Still, you keep your best side forward. Even if that side is technically the back of your head, Portrait Day in the palace isn't just an annual tradition, it's an endurance test. The preparations begin at dawn, when 3 ladies in waiting descend upon you armed with goose-fat pomade, enough powder to choke a horse, and a determination to smooth every rebellious strand of hair into submission. The air fills with the scent of lavender, wax, and rising panic. You're squeezed into the family's sturdiest velvet gown, the one with enough lace to curtain Westminster Abbey and a collar so high it doubles as a neck brace. It's less fashion and more structural support, and that's just for the under-12 set. Today's guest of honor is Monsieur Lafleur, the court's most sought-after portraitist. He arrives with a trunk of oils, brushes, and a faint air of existential dread. Rumor has it he once painted 3 generations of the Spanish royal family and has been flinching at the sight of a pronounced underbite ever since. He smiles politely and immediately begins rearranging the furniture for optimal lighting, which is code for shadows that hide the family's more adventurous chins. You're posed by the window, sunlight streaming in, squinting just enough to look thoughtful but not so much that it deepens the already worrying family creases. Your governess hovers, whispering reminders, chin up, shoulders back, lips closed, eyes forward, and for the love of God, keep your jaw relaxed. The artist circles, frowning, tilting your head this way and that like a particularly disappointing vase at a country auction. Perhaps a little more to the left, he suggests. Your neck is already beginning to cramp. Meanwhile, a parade of siblings and cousins line up for their turn. Some protest. Others are bribed with candied violets. And one is wheeled in on a tiny chaise longue, because standing upright for 30 minutes is not medically advisable this season. As you sit for your portrait, a page boy quietly slips a pillow behind your back, a courtesy developed after 3 fainting incidents in the last painting session. The air is thick with anticipation and the occasional suppressed giggle as your youngest brother attempts to sneak a family ferret into the background. The artist gets to work, his brush flicking across the canvas with a skillful flourish. At first, you're optimistic. Maybe he'll capture your best side, whichever that is. But after several hours and one particularly brutal session with the nose powder, you catch a glimpse of the unfinished painting. The eyes look familiar, the gown is accurate. But the jaw has been gently softened, reduced, and, if you're being honest, replaced with something borrowed from a neighboring duchy's portrait. It's not a lie, exactly. It's royal brand management. As the days drag on, the portrait takes shape. The background is a study in tastefully blurred tapestries and imaginary gardens, designed to distract from any genetic surprises lurking in the foreground. By the end, you've learned to hold your breath for so long you could qualify as the palace's official underwater ambassador. When the unveiling comes, the entire family gathers in the grand hall, eager to see the result. There are gasps of delight, a few nods of approval, and one great aunt who squints suspiciously and asks, "Did she always have that nose?" The answer, as always, is of course, dear. It's the family nose, though everyone silently thanks Monsieur Lafleur for trimming a few historical inches. Copies of the portrait are sent across Europe, tokens of beauty, diplomacy, and wishful thinking. Future suitors study your softened features, unaware of the artist's valiant battle with family genetics and candlelight. Your likeness is now immortalized, serene, elegant, and as free from hereditary jawlines as oil paint can make you. In the end, you leave the portrait session exhausted but satisfied. You've survived another round of royal brand control, another dance with the brush and the family skeletons. Somewhere in the archives, next to your ancestors' equally improved likenesses, your portrait waits, a testament to the enduring power of art, ambition, and a little strategic soft focus. Welcome to royal history, one slightly airbrushed chin at a time. While other children learn please and thank you, your lessons include how to greet your uncle, fiancé without flinching, and how to politely pretend you've never seen your future husband at a christening. Let's be honest. When you're a royal daughter, etiquette lessons are less about teacups and more about emotional gymnastics. In the palace schoolroom, your French tutor covers conjugation, your dance master corrects your posture, and your governess whispers. If anyone asks, you met him at court, not in the nursery. There are rules, and then there are royal rules. And the latter often involve elaborate fictions and a refusal to count past the second cousin. You spend hours each week rehearsing the family bow, a move designed to project just enough enthusiasm for whichever prince happens to be in fashion, while subtly disguising the fact that you've known him since your joint measles outbreak. There are lessons in how to hold hands at a ball, gently but not so gently that anyone suspects you've been doing it since the age of 4. Keep your eyes demure, but your family tree handy, the governess says. You never know when you'll need to cite lineage as a reason to break off an engagement, or to cement one. At state banquets, place cards are arranged not just by rank, but by degree of genetic separation. If you're seated next to a young duke who shares 3 grandparents with you, smile and accept the conversation about the weather. If it's only 2 grandparents, you might want to add a second pair of gloves before dessert. The fork and knife choreography is easy compared to the diplomatic dance of "How are we related again?" The answer, usually, is closer than comfort, but not close enough to alarm the ambassador. Private instruction also covers advanced denial. Never admit to recognizing a suitor from the family portraits in your father's study, warns your etiquette tutor, who looks suspiciously like your mother's 3rd cousin. You're schooled in how to look surprised when your engagement is announced, despite the fact that you've been swapping toys with the groom-to-be since teething. The goal is to maintain an air of wide-eyed innocence, even as the guests whisper, "A perfect match." The chins align. When visitors from foreign courts arrive, you're expected to introduce yourself with an air of polite mystery. Don't mention the last wedding you both attended. Yours, his, or that shared cousin's, nobody's keeping track anymore. Instead, focus on charming small talk, like the latest trends in lace or the weather in Vienna. If anyone brings up the family resemblance, you simply laugh and say, "It's a strong tradition. You're not lying." Behind closed doors, the family takes etiquette even further. There are mock engagement rehearsals, yes, actual practice runs where you're paired up with eligible cousins and reminded to ignore any childhood squabbles. No mention of the incident with the frog in the soup, someone hisses. That was last summer, and besides, he apologized. Each lesson is a delicate balance of denial, deflection, and selective memory. At court, there's a special vocabulary for these relationships. Words like close-knit, well-matched, and time-honored tradition are code for "we ran out of eligible strangers." Marriage contracts are drafted with more clauses than a modern software agreement, including a polite footnote. Bride and groom are, for the purposes of this document, unrelated enough to prevent immediate disaster. Even the palace chaplain gets in on the act. His wedding sermons always mention the union of noble houses, never the union of, say, first cousins. You memorize prayers for health, happiness, and genetic variety, recited with fingers crossed and an extra pinch of holy water just in case. Yet, through all this, you're taught to smile, curtsy, and act as if nothing is amiss. The art of royal etiquette is the art of looking untroubled while quietly calculating which branch of the family tree is safest for your own children. In the end, you emerge from the etiquette gauntlet poised, unflappable, and ready to face a future where every family reunion doubles as speed dating. Because in the royal world, a little polite denial is the first lesson and the last line of defense. At the table, you can identify guests by their noses, their walking sticks, or, in a pinch, the number of extra digits. Cousin George has the best mustache, but unfortunately, he's also your legal guardian. Welcome to Royal Family Dinner, a spectacle that combines the etiquette of a diplomatic summit with the medical intrigue of a Victorian freak show. The grand dining hall flickers with candlelight, the air heavy with roasted meats, boiled turnips, and a faint undercurrent of anxiety. Every seat is assigned according to rank, proximity to the king, and, unspoken but understood, the likelihood that someone will accidentally bite through a silver spoon. Your place at the long mahogany table is wedged between Aunt Charlotte, whose eyesight is as unreliable as the family's claim to the Scottish throne, and a younger cousin who is not so much your cousin as a living cautionary tale about first cousin marriages. The conversation is light, the gossip heavy, and you quickly learn to navigate the menu by watching which foods the eldest uncles avoid. Hint: anything that requires chewing. Across the table, there's a familiar parade of hereditary quirks on full display. Uncle Edward's ear twitches every time someone mentions succession. Lady Margaret is wearing gloves, indoors, ostensibly for fashion, but everyone knows it's to disguise the legendary double thumb that runs on her mother's side. One branch of the family favors the classic Habsburg jaw, while another produces children with feet so flat they could double as dinner plates. No one ever says the word inbreeding, of course. The term at court is bloodlines, and the older generation speaks of them with the reverence of fine wine. Such pure stock, they declare, as if anyone outside the palace would believe a jaw like that came from anything but centuries of kissing cousins. The most awkward moment comes when the royal genealogist appears, gently reminding everyone not to play leapfrog over the family tree. The food, meanwhile, is served with military precision. Dishes arrive in waves. Venison with prune sauce, turnip soufflé, and the ever-mysterious family recipe stew, which is rumored to contain at least one ingredient from each of the royal estates. The silverware glints in the candlelight, beautiful, impractical, and occasionally dangerous if you have the famous family tremor. You keep your elbows in, your napkin ready, and your conversation focused on the weather. Never politics, never health. Still, the dinner table is where alliances are formed and family feuds are aired, often at the same time. Sibling rivalry plays out over the last slice of roast goose. The Dowager Duchess glares at anyone who dares to pour salt before she does. A tradition started, they say, when her own father tried to poison his brother. Old wounds surface. Remember the time you married my governess? Is met with, yes, and she still makes a better pie than you. It's all very civilized until someone knocks over the gravy boat and Cousin George's mustache becomes collateral damage. Meanwhile, beneath the surface, it's a genetic version of bingo. Who will show the first sign of gout? Which child will be sent home early with an unexplained rash? Why does the new Spanish cousin look exactly like the old French cousin but speaks neither language? Every glance is a diagnosis. Every anecdote, a family medical history. If you're clever, you learn to listen for the code words. Delicate constitution means another fainting fit. Robust appetite means they've survived at least 2 winters without a doctor. As dessert is served, usually something sticky and aggressively British, you make mental bets on which family trait will take the spotlight next. Will it be the legendary royal snore that shakes the upper gallery? Or will Uncle Rupert launch into his annual toast about the strength of our noble blood, ignoring the fact that 3 guests have already excused themselves to the apothecary? By the end of the meal, you're exhausted, overfed, and only mildly traumatized. Another successful royal dinner. No one fainted into the soup, and only one cousin left with a mysterious limp. You retire to your room, reflecting on the miracle that any of you are still upright. In this house, survival is a team sport, and the family table is where you learn who's winning the game of spot the genetic mutation, one overcooked turnip at a time. At the ripe age of 12, you're declared eligible. Prospective suitors arrive with family trees in hand. The only question anyone asks, how many great-grandparents do you share with this one? Welcome to the grand and slightly claustrophobic bazaar known as the Royal Marriage Market. Forget first loves, schoolgirl crushes, or even casual pen pals. Here, your romantic prospects are weighed, measured, and checked for matching birth defects before you're allowed to accept a single wilted rose. There's no swiping right, just a steady parade of eligible bachelors who, in a twist that only makes sense in royal circles, all seem to share your nose. The selection process starts early. At breakfast, your mother is already reading aloud a letter from a distant archduke who admires your profile, though he's only ever seen your profile in a slightly retouched oil painting. Aunts and dowagers descend on the nursery armed with genealogy scrolls, squinting at the looping calligraphy and muttering, "Second cousin twice removed, oh, but that's practically a stranger." The more branches a suitor's tree shares with yours, the more likely he is to get an invitation for tea and a discreet medical exam. Soon, your days become a blur of introductions and family reunions masquerading as courtship rituals. You're paraded through endless drawing rooms, forced to smile politely while a small army of mothers measure your posture, your poise, and your potential to produce children with only the usual number of toes. Each suitor is introduced with a flourish, and your governess whispers their relationship to you. He's your father's cousin's son on the Spanish side. Don't ask about the chin. It's complicated. You're expected to curtsy, converse about the weather, and not faint at the prospect of sharing a future with someone who once shared your cradle. The conversation is less, what are your interests, and more. How many healthy siblings do you have? In this market, good teeth are as prized as good titles, and a family free of mysterious rashes is worth more than gold. Suitors boast of their noble lineage, and, with pride, recite how many generations their family has avoided the worst of the jawline. If you're lucky, your potential husband can ride a horse and count to 20. If you're very lucky, he can do both at the same time. Every evening, the family gathers to review the bids. Matchmakers present portfolios like medieval dating apps, miniature portraits, letters of intent, and always a family tree with the dicey bits discreetly inked over. The elders debate each suitor's merits. One is brave in battle but has a history of fainting at the sight of sheep. Another is charming but has never met a vegetable he could digest. Your own preferences are, of course, not consulted. You're told that love grows after marriage, preferably somewhere outside the direct family line. Of course, there are scandals, whispered stories of a cousin marrying beneath her station, only to produce offspring with suspiciously symmetrical faces. Such reckless experiments are viewed as cautionary tales. The pressure to choose correctly is immense. One false step and you might doom the family bloodline to normalcy, a fate worse than exile. When a frontrunner emerges, the negotiations begin in earnest. The dowry is discussed, acres of land, a small fortune in silver, and, naturally, a thoroughbred horse with fewer leg problems than your average uncle. You're measured for your wedding gown before you even know your future husband's favorite color. Letters are exchanged, pacts are made, and suddenly, it's official. You're engaged to someone who is both your soulmate and your cousin, give or take a degree. On your engagement day, the court celebrates, the bells ring, and the genealogist is given a bonus. You smile for the portraits, careful not to stand too close to your betrothed. Someone might mistake you for siblings, and frankly, that's bad optics, even for royalty. In the end, the marriage market closes for the season. Your fate is sealed, and you brace yourself for a lifetime of polite conversation, shared jawlines, and an unbreakable bond, the kind only centuries of cousine marriage can provide. Welcome to the royal family. And don't forget to send thank you notes to both sets of grandparents. They're the same people after all. When the big day comes, your new fiancé proposes in Latin. You nod politely, trying not to faint from anemia, or from the realization that you both call the same woman grandmama. It's proposal season in the palace, a time marked by bouquets of rare flowers, awkward glances, and the sound of your governess whispering, "Smile, dear, and don't lock your knees." The room is decorated with a blend of nervous excitement and heavy, inherited tapestries. Courtiers hover, pretending not to listen, though everyone is dying to know if you'll accept the ring, the title, and the full set of matching chromosomes. Your fiancé, the pride of 3 royal houses and at least one infamous scandal, kneels before you, on both knees. Not for added drama, but because years of ceremonial inbreeding have left his ankles as sturdy as yesterday's bread. He offers you a ring, possibly the same one your mother wore, and delivers his practiced speech in flawless Latin, a language that's romantic only if you ignore the fact that it sounds a bit like the priest giving last rites. You accept with a gracious smile, or at least an approximation of one. After all, you've both had years of lessons in how to look thrilled about arrangements you didn't choose. In truth, you're mostly relieved that nobody tripped over the family dog or fainted during the surprise moment. If you're lucky, you avoid making eye contact with your future mother-in-law, who is, in fact, already your aunt. The witnesses clap, the musicians play something slow and dignified, and a servant is dispatched to alert the king. This isn't just a proposal, it's an event. The palace buzzes with the news. And within hours, the engagement is the talk of every drawing room from London to Vienna. Letters are sent, alliances confirmed, and the family physician discreetly reviews both your medical charts to make sure you're not allergic to each other, at least, not any more than the last pair. There's a celebratory dinner, naturally, where everyone is required to toast the happy couple with a chalice of something vaguely medicinal. The royal aunts recount their own engagement stories, one involving a runaway peacock, another featuring an accidental proposal to the wrong twin. Each tale ends with a warning about good breeding, and a reminder to always keep spare-smelling salts at hand. Your fiancé is paraded in front of the assembled family. Great-uncle Rupert peers at him through a monocle, nodding approvingly. "Solid bone structure," he murmurs, conveniently ignoring the fact that you share it. Cousin Beatrice, the unofficial keeper of family secrets, leans in to whisper, "He's not so bad, you know. At least he can read." It's the highest praise you'll get. After the meal, tradition dictates that you and your fiancé exchange tokens of affection, a lock of hair, a miniature portrait, or, in your case, a perfectly preserved baby tooth from each family line. The court artist is summoned for a double portrait, instructed to soften any features that might betray the close relationship between you and your beloved. Perhaps the artist suggests, a touch more shadow under the jaw. The next days are a whirlwind of etiquette rehearsals, official visits, and long walks through the palace gardens, always chaperoned by a vigilant aunt. You and your fiancé make small talk, swapping stories about tutors and nannies, only occasionally drifting into conversations about family holidays where you now realize you were both present. It's not so much getting to know you as remembering what we already know, but with better posture. And then there are the gifts, boxes and boxes of them. Jewelry from distant relatives, embroidered linens from hopeful cousins, and the occasional bottle of imported tonic for the nerves. The royal apothecary discreetly slides you a vial of iron supplements. Just in case, he says, proposal season can be taxing on the constitution. At night, as you retire to your room, you review the day's events and practice your new signature. The proposal is over, the engagement official, and the entire kingdom now expects you to be both thrilled and fertile. You gaze at the moonlit garden, wondering which branch of the family tree you'll be climbing next. In the end, you're not just marrying a person, you're marrying centuries of tradition, duty, and, most importantly, survival with a side of polite denial. You fall asleep to the lullaby of distant celebrations, the echo of Latin vows, and the comforting knowledge that at least, for tonight, no one brought up the family jaw. Your marriage settlement includes acres of boggy land, 3 miniature portraits, and the family's favorite recessive genes, all tied up with a lovely bow. The royal dowry, a time-honored tradition that turns every royal daughter into a walking, talking portfolio. Forget romance. This is the grand finale of months of negotiation, decades of family plotting, and centuries of awkwardly exchanged cousins. If your engagement was a game of match the bloodlines, the dowry is where everyone shows their cards and hopes the winning hand doesn't have a surprise sixth finger. First, the land. You might dream of lush English fields or a cozy French vineyard, but what you actually receive is the finest mossy acreage in the Welsh marches, as described by a courtier who clearly never saw it in the rain. These parcels are meticulously mapped out on yellowed scrolls, showing boundaries drawn more by feuds than by nature. Your share might include a crumbling manor, a forest full of wild boar and wilder rumors, and a village whose main export is tragic ballads about previous owners. Next come the jewels, chests of sapphires, strands of pearls, and more tiaras than a pageant for 12-headed princesses. But here's the secret. Every piece comes with its own family legend, and usually at least one curse. The emerald necklace is said to bring luck, unless you lend it to an aunt with gout. The ruby brooch? Acquired during a diplomatic misunderstanding with Spain. Each piece is polished and inspected, and the family goldsmith assures you it's absolutely genuine, which in royal terms means at least 60% not glass. If you're lucky, there's a matching set for every potential hereditary condition. The portraits. Oh, the portraits. These are not just keepsakes, they're diplomatic ammunition. Each tiny oval is painted by a trembling artist sworn to secrecy about the chin. Your job is to distribute them among in-laws, godparents, and ambassadors, who will study your likeness and decide, diplomatically, whether your children might need corrective dentistry in the future. If you're clever, you'll hold back the best portrait for the suitor most likely to inherit actual money, rather than debts and moral support. And then, of course, there's the fine print, the invisible part of the dowry that everyone tries very hard not to mention. This includes an extensive collection of inherited gifts, not the good kind, but the sort you get from generations of cousin marriage. The family's favorite recessive genes come tucked in with the wedding linens. A dash of hemophilia here, a hint of delicate constitution there, and a side order of unexplained allergies. The court physician stands by with a nervous smile and a bottle of laudanum, just in case anyone starts bleeding unexpectedly during the toast. No dowry is complete without the ceremonial paperwork. The marriage contract, hand-copied by a scribe who knows more palace secrets than the royal parrot, lists each asset in glorious detail. 20 sheep, 6 silver goblets, 2 questionable tapestries, and the right to call yourself Baroness of Mudford under the Bog. If your new in-laws are particularly crafty, there's a clause for future inheritance, which is code for "we hope your side dies out first so we get your stuff." Once the ink dries, the celebrations begin. You parade your new treasures through the palace for the admiration of the court and the envy of your sisters, all of whom secretly hope you trip and scatter the pearls. It's a family tradition. The jewels are locked away, the land deeds delivered to a steward who can neither read nor swim, and the portraits sent on a diplomatic tour of Europe, where they'll be admired, copied, and, occasionally, used as dartboards by disappointed suitors. But even with all this wealth, you're reminded, gently but often, that a royal dowry is more burden than windfall. You're not just bringing gold and silver to your new household. You're importing expectations, obligations, and a few skeletons, sometimes literally, from the family crypt. You smile for the crowd, adjust the emerald necklace, and try not to think about the acres of bog you now technically own. In the end, the greatest treasure you offer isn't in the coffers, the chests, or even the miniature portraits. It's your ability to smile graciously, carry the weight of royal history, and accept that your dowry is just another chapter in the endless, ever-looping family saga, all tied up with a bow, and the hope that, just this once, the recessive genes might skip a generation. You glide down the aisle in a gown that weighs more than you do. The groom's face is hidden behind a veil of lace, or possibly just poor dental hygiene. Congratulations. It's a perfect genetic match. The royal wedding is finally here, and all of England is watching. The palace bells peal, the streets overflow with well-wishers, and you, at the center of it all, are balancing a 40-pound dress and 400 years of questionable family decisions. Every step is an exercise in core strength and etiquette, as you try not to trip on your own train or lock eyes with any of the ex-cousins in the front row. Your wedding gown is an architectural marvel. Dozens of seamstresses have labored for weeks, stitching pearls and lace into every inch. The bodice is reinforced with enough whalebone to qualify as a minor ship. You can barely breathe. But at least you're less likely to faint than your great-aunt Beatrice, who famously toppled over during her vows and was revived with a mixture of brandy and aggressive fanning. Your veil trails behind you like a diplomatic mission, held aloft by a parade of small, confused relatives, each one a living reminder that this wedding is more merger than romance. The aisle is a gauntlet of smiling faces and barely concealed calculations. Nobles compare genealogies under their breath, wagering which side of the family will dominate in your future children's chins. The king, your father, beams with pride, or possibly just relief that another daughter is about to become someone else's genetic responsibility. Your mother dabs her eyes, both from sentiment and from the knowledge that the wedding linens will have to be reused for your sisters. Recycling is a royal tradition. As you reach the altar, your groom lifts his veil. He smiles, a winning combination of nerves, sincerity, and a row of teeth that have clearly weathered several generations of royal dentistry. You've been assured it's all part of the family look. The priest begins the ceremony, and you recite your vows with the careful diction of someone who's been practicing since the engagement was announced, and probably since birth. Somewhere in the pews, a great-uncle coughs, a sound that's half blessing, half warning about the perils of the family's delicate lungs. It's a perfect genetic match, at least on parchment. The court physician is in attendance, armed with smelling salts, a chart of hereditary traits, and a backup vial of laudanum just in case. He watches the proceedings with the keen eye of a man whose primary job is to ensure the next heir survives past the christening. Your sisters exchange nervous glances, not sure whether to envy you or start planning their own escape routes. When the rings are exchanged, you catch a glimpse of your groom's hand, yes, all 6 fingers. It's considered lucky, at least by the branch of the family that started counting toes after the second cousin's wedding. The guests clap politely, careful not to jostle any of the more elderly relatives. Confetti rains down in the form of dried rose petals, rice, and, if rumors are true, a discreet sprinkle of medicinal herbs to ward off the pox. The feast that follows is as lavish as it is treacherous. Platters of roast game, towers of sugared fruit, and a wedding cake with enough layers to serve as a makeshift stepladder for the flower girls. The wine flows, the musicians play, and the newlyweds attempt the first dance, a slow, careful waltz designed less for romance and more to test the stability of the bride's spine. Guests whisper about which side of the family will be more visible in the future portraits, and whether the next royal child will inherit the jaw, the nose, or just an aversion to daylight. By the end of the night, you're exhausted, over-congratulated, and covered in a thin dusting of face powder, confetti, and possibly optimism. The wedding is declared a success, a triumph of diplomacy, tradition, and careful selection. You retire to your new quarters, greeted by servants, bouquets, and a pile of gifts that includes everything from diamond tiaras to a commemorative bottle of tonic for pedigree pox. You glance in the mirror, adjust your crown, and remind yourself, the real marriage begins tomorrow, but tonight you've survived the aisle, the vows, and the long shadow of the family tree. Congratulations. You're officially a royal wife, and statistically the odds are you're also your own third cousin. You're whisked away to a cold stone castle where passion battles hereditary arthritis. Your new husband brings you a rose. You bring him a chart of inheritable conditions. The royal honeymoon is less an escape to a romantic paradise and more of a diplomatic deployment to a family stronghold with extra drafts and fewer comfortable chairs. There's no tropical island, no secret villa, just an ancestral fortress perched on a windswept hill. Its main features, unyielding stone, a selection of antique tapestries, and a lingering smell of wet dog that not even rosewater can conquer. Your carriage lurches to a halt in the castle courtyard, and you're greeted by servants, two hounds with suspiciously similar underbites, and a mother-in-law who's already judging your posture. Inside, the castle is decorated for celebration, meaning a bowl of slightly wilted flowers in the hallway, 3 extra torches lit for warmth, and the family physician lurking nearby, just in case anyone's joints seize up before dessert. You're shown to your new chambers, where your trunks are already unpacked and your nightgowns neatly folded alongside a special emergency hot water bottle. The canopied bed is so high you need a step stool, helpfully supplied by a footman with knees that crack like thunder. And the sheets are stiff with fresh starch and the scent of medicinal ointment. Night falls, and with it, the castle's temperature. You and your new husband bundle up in layers of velvet, wool, and unspoken family expectations. The romantic fireside chat you imagined turns into a careful negotiation over how many blankets each of you requires for optimal joint support. Your husband, attempting gallantry, presents you with a single, slightly wilted rose, grown, he assures you, in the royal hothouse, though it looks suspiciously like it's been recycled from his last 3 engagements. As you settle into married life, you discover that the first order of business isn't passion, it's paperwork. Together, you pore over charts drawn up by the family physician, a man who never smiles and always smells faintly of cloves. There's a touch of gout on your mother's side, he announces, and a strong tendency toward unfortunate ankles on his. You nod politely, making a mental note to add extra cushions to the dining chairs. Nothing sets the mood quite like a discussion about hereditary nosebleeds. Meals are a surreal blend of awkward romance and medical caution. You dine by candlelight, feasting on roast partridge, boiled root vegetables, and bread so dense it could be used as a doorstop. Your husband toasts to your future, may our union be fruitful and our ailments manageable. The cook presents you with a special dish, stewed cherries for circulation, a nod to the family's legendary vein issues. You exchange polite conversation, occasionally interrupted by the castle apothecary, who wants to know if either of you are allergic to beeswax. Just in case the next generation island, afternoons are spent exploring the castle's endless drafty corridors, peering at faded tapestries depicting ancestors who seem to be warning you with their eyes. There's a formal garden, more mud than rosebush, and a family chapel where every stained glass window features a suspiciously familiar nose. The only real privacy you have is during your daily walk, chaperoned, naturally, around the castle ramparts, where you and your husband practice the art of polite conversation, careful not to bring up anything too racy, like the recent outbreak of royal tow. At night, you both soak your feet in lavender water, share stories of embarrassing childhood accidents, and compare notes on which family member had the most dramatic fainting episode. The romance is gentle, tentative, and always slightly overshadowed by the looming possibility of a shared medical crisis. Still, there's a comfort in the routine. You realize that your new life isn't just about passion and pageantry, it's about navigating the endless family foibles with grace, humor, and a reliable supply of herbal tea. By the end of the honeymoon, you've learned the most important lesson of royal marriage. True love is patient, kind, and comes with a well-stocked medicine chest. You drift to sleep beneath a fortress of blankets, serenaded by the wind, the distant howl of the hounds, and the soft creak of joints, both young and old. The honeymoon might not be romantic in the storybook sense, but you have each other, matching sets of hot water bottles, and, if you're lucky, a slightly lower risk of gout in the next generation. Your new job is to produce heirs, preferably boys. Every pregnancy is a high-stakes lottery. The stakes? The continuation of a dynasty, and maybe a few new family syndromes for the medical textbooks. Welcome to the royal bedchamber, a place as much laboratory as boudoir, where velvet drapes and gold-threaded coverlets can't disguise the sense of generational panic in the air. You're not just expected to be a devoted wife, but a living factory of perfectly healthy heirs. As if healthy is even an option at this point in the royal gene pool. From the moment the wedding feasts have faded and the last guest has stumbled off with a stolen centerpiece, the entire court is counting down to your first happy announcement. No pressure, but the family line, the national stability, and a few hundred years of royal portraits all depend on the outcome of your uterus. The royal physicians bustle in, offering advice, good wishes, and tonics that taste like moldy furniture. You are weighed, prodded, and measured with the enthusiasm of a prized dairy cow. Charts of your cycles are secretly maintained by 2 different governesses and an overeager court astrologer. Your diet is carefully regulated: boiled meats for strength, turnip pottage for vigor, and a small mountain of stale cake because someone read it was lucky in France. You can barely walk across the chamber without tripping over a nursemaid or a prayer cushion, all in the name of fertility. The first months are an exercise in public speculation and private anxiety. Every feint, every craving, every morning spent green at the gills is catalogued by a small army of hopeful courtiers. She asked for pickled onions at breakfast. Surely a boy, says one. No, she looks slightly to the left when she walks. That's a sign of twins, claims another. News of your progress filters through the palace like wildfire, reaching the kitchens, the stables, and inevitably the pamphleteers. Every hiccup is a headline. Is the Queen expecting? Local goat hopes so. When the happy news finally arrives, the pressure multiplies. Your husband beams with pride, the king calls for a day of prayer, and your mother-in-law starts sewing baby bonnets embroidered with the family crest and, hopefully, not the family jawline. The court physician offers an unending parade of advice. Walk in the gardens at sunrise. Avoid cheese after sunset. Don't read anything too exciting, and, above all, think positive thoughts about boys. You're also gifted holy relics, rabbit's feet, and at least 2 icons rumored to have worked for an Austrian archduchess in 1631, But as the months tick by, reality sets in. Pregnancy in the royal family isn't a gentle glow, it's a marathon of nausea, swelling, and anxious waiting. The midwives swap stories of other royal births, some miraculous, some less so. Your job, aside from gestating, is to remain calm, composed, and blissfully ignorant of the family's more colorful medical history. The physicians do their best to reassure you, but you can't help but notice that every healthy baby is hailed as a triumph of science, while every hiccup is blamed on the Spanish blood. When labor arrives, the whole palace seems to hold its breath. The Queen's chamber becomes a battleground, with every possible remedy on hand: herbal teas, sharp knives, and enough prayers to fill a cathedral. The birth itself is less a private moment and more a royal command performance. Courtiers, physicians, and occasionally even parliamentarians linger just outside the door, waiting for the news. Is it a boy? Does he have all his fingers? Did she survive? These are the questions whispered in candlelit corridors. When the heir is finally born, the celebrations are grand, the relief is palpable, and the betting on future traits begins immediately. A strong nose, he'll go far. Those toes look promising, but always, in the back of everyone's mind, is the knowledge that the real roulette wheel keeps spinning. Every new baby is a gamble. Will he inherit the family charm or the family gout? Will she look like her mother or develop a mysterious tendency to faint at the sight of turnips? No one knows, but everyone watches. And so, night after night, you settle into the royal bedchamber, knowing that your every move is history in the making, and that in the great royal lottery, you can only hope to beat the odds, or at least not add any new ones to the record books. You wake to the delightful aroma of boiled cabbage and anxiety. The court physicians recommend leeches, the midwives recommend prayer. The only guarantee is a constant, nagging sense of foreboding. Every royal pregnancy is a public spectacle. But the reality is much less gilded and much more grimy. Your mornings start before sunrise, jolted awake by the cathedral bells, the sound of bustling servants, and a persistent feeling of doom that's as much hereditary as it is environmental. As you try to lift your head, your stomach lurches in protest, making you reconsider every decision, especially the one involving last night's eel pie. Breakfast, such as it is, awaits. It's always boiled cabbage, sometimes with turnips, sometimes without, always with a hint of medicinal herbs that smell suspiciously like despair. Your ladies-in-waiting bustle around, trying to coax you into eating something for the baby. But even the sight of congealed pudding makes you green. The only thing more reliable than your nausea is the steady procession of well-meaning advisors. The head physician, whose hands are colder than the marble floors, insists that leeches will rebalance the humors. He's already arranged for several to be placed strategically along your forearm, just in case your complexion gets too rosy. You're not sure if you're supposed to feel better or just feel less. The midwives, meanwhile, suggest prayer. God knows best, they murmur, while silently comparing notes on how many royal babies have arrived early, late, or not at all. Their remedy for nearly every symptom: more rest, more broth, and occasionally waving a holy relic over your abdomen for luck. You accept all of it, leeches, prayer, and relics, because in the world of royal motherhood, hope is just another ingredient in the medicine cabinet. If the morning is about nausea, the nights are about nosebleeds. You drift in and out of uneasy sleep, only to wake with a pillowcase spattered in crimson, a sight that sends your nursemaid running and your mother-in-law into a litany of family medical history. Your great-grandfather had nosebleeds before every battle, she assures you, as if a little hemorrhaging is the mark of destiny. The physician is summoned again, this time with vinegar-soaked cloths and a set of instructions that mostly involve pinching and prayer. Between the nausea and the nosebleeds, You begin to suspect that royal pregnancy is a test of endurance, like a medieval obstacle course designed by someone who hates women and adores cabbage. The palace staff treat every new symptom as a chance to revisit family legends. Did Aunt Matilda's mysterious rash signal twins? Was the Duchess of Kent's morning vomiting really what they claimed, or just a cover for a poorly timed hangover? The stories swirl around you, half comfort, half warning. The anxiety isn't just physical, it's psychological too. Every time you manage to nap, your dreams are haunted by visions of pale, weakly heirs, or the ghost of some distant relative with a fondness for fainting in public. You're reminded, constantly, that every cough or cramp could mean something more. The palace is full of whispers. The cooks speculate about your cravings. The maids gossip about your color. The courtiers take bets on whether your baby will arrive with the royal nose or the even more notorious family chin. Despite all this, there are fleeting moments of calm. Sometimes the baby kicks, and for a moment you forget everything but that strange, hopeful flutter. Occasionally, a kindly midwife sneaks you a slice of candied ginger or tells you an off-color joke about the king's feet. These are small mercies in a world otherwise ruled by protocols, powders, and persistent dread. As the days and weeks stretch on, you adapt. You keep a bowl by your bedside and a handkerchief under your pillow. You learn to nap sitting up to minimize both nausea and the risk of nosebleeds. And through it all, you maintain a polite smile for the ever-watchful eyes of the court, because in the royal family, misery is always best served with a side of decorum. By the time the next dawn arrives, you're already bracing for another round of cabbage, leeches, and whispered prayers. After all, you're not just making a baby, you're making history, one sleepless, queasy, and slightly blood-spattered night at a time. Your first child arrives. The nurses count everything, twice. Is the jaw supposed to do that? Someone whispers. You shrug. You've seen worse at family reunions. The birth of a royal child is less a moment of joy and more a medical audit conducted by a committee of worried women, stern physicians, and at least 2 priests. The palace erupts in a frenzy before you've even had a sip of water. Bells are rung, proclamations drafted, and a crowd gathers at the palace gates to cheer. Or, let's be honest, to see if the newborn will have all the right parts in the right places. Inside your chambers, the atmosphere is a blend of excitement, exhaustion, and mild dread. As soon as the baby emerges, the staff leaps into action. 2 midwives, one on each side, examine the newest royal, squinting suspiciously at every limb, digit, and ear. 10 fingers, 10 toes. They announce, only to be immediately corrected by the head nurse who recounts, 10 toes. But is that 11 fingers? No, just a shadow, false alarm. Everyone relax. The family physician approaches next, armed with a stethoscope that's mostly decorative and an expression that says, I've seen everything and I expect to see more. He lifts the infant's tiny arm, peers into its mouth, and gently probes the jaw, which, yes, has a certain unmistakable angle to it. Very regal, he pronounces diplomatically. The court scribe makes a note. Chin, pronounced. Eyes, alert. Hair, uncertain. This record will be referenced for years to come, especially if anything ever goes sideways. Your mother-in-law bursts in for her own inspection, nostrils flaring like a prize horse. He looks just like the family. She sighs in relief. You resist the urge to mention that the family is the entire problem. Other relatives crowd the room, peering over one another's shoulders and exchanging knowing glances as they conduct a game of spot the inherited trait. Does the baby have Uncle Rupert's nose? Aunt Margaret's ears? Great-grandpa's third nipple? These are questions of national interest. The baby's first cries are greeted with more applause than the king's last speech. Courtiers in the hallway whisper, strong lungs, that's the Irish blood. The nursemaids swaddle your child in the softest lace the family can afford, then immediately unwrap him again, just to double-check for any birthmarks, extra toes, or subtle hints of Spanish jaw. He's perfect, they say, though there's always a tiny pause before the word perfect. Then comes the ceremonial presentation. The newborn is carried to the window, held up for the adoring crowds below like a prized loaf of bread. A herald announces, "A healthy prince! The line is secure." From the garden, a flock of pigeons takes off in fright, startled by the trumpet fanfare and the roar of cannon fire. A bit much, you think, but tradition is tradition. The family chaplain arrives next, dabbing holy water on the baby's brow and offering prayers for robust health, and with a subtle glance at you, continued improvement in the royal complexion. If the baby yawns, everyone gasps. Just like his father. If the baby sneezes, someone faints. If the baby farts, well, that's not discussed. But the nursemaids exchange secret smiles. All of it is written down, gossiped over, and inevitably makes its way into the official family records. And yet, for all the drama, there's a real sense of relief. In a world where infant mortality is high, every healthy child is a miracle, however lopsided the chin. The nursery soon fills with gifts, silver rattles, embroidered blankets, and a suspiciously large supply of medicinal teas for future emergencies. You're given a cup of broth, a warm hand to hold, and a moment, however brief, to marvel at the tiny, perfect imperfection in your arms. As the sun sets, the palace quiets down. The nurses tuck your little prince into a cradle as ornate as a cathedral, and you try to rest, knowing that tomorrow brings more scrutiny, more comparisons, and a lifetime of counting fingers, toes, and inherited oddities. But for now, you close your eyes, grateful that your child, for all the rumors and royal pressure, is absolutely unmistakably yours. Your daughters are the next pawns in the marriage market. Their first lessons, walking, curtsying, and reciting all their cousins' birthdays by heart. From the moment your royal daughters take their first wobbly steps, it's clear that their path is less about freedom and more about choreography. Their nursery is a rehearsal hall for future negotiations, and every day is a crash course in being marketable to a European court that prefers its brides decorative, diplomatic, and, most importantly, traceable to every other family on the continent. The governesses march in at dawn, armed with hairbrushes, etiquette manuals, and a family tree the size of a bedspread. Let's practice introductions, they say, lining the girls up in order of birth, prettiness, and potential to hide a mild case of webbed toes. Beauty is a team sport in the palace, and no expense is spared to keep your daughters polished and presentable. Milk baths are poured, ointments applied, and hair is curled into elaborate styles that double as structural engineering exercises. Each morning, the girls are measured for new gowns, always an inch longer, always with sleeves wide enough to hide the family's signature elbows. By age 7, your eldest is already a master at the portrait pose, tilting her chin at just the right angle to suggest nobility, innocence, and only a faint suspicion of underbite. But beauty is only the beginning. The lessons in breeding, both literal and metaphorical, start young. Your daughters are introduced to the court's finest horses, prize-winning pugs, and the occasional imported guinea pig, all to hammer home the lesson. Value is in pedigree, whether you're a princess or a spaniel. The royal physician gives impromptu lectures about robust constitutions and healthy teeth, all while ignoring the fact that 3 out of 4 siblings can't eat a raw apple without a trip to the apothecary. Then there's the betrothal training, the real reason for all the effort. Each daughter is drilled in the delicate art of the diplomatic curtsy, the non-committal smile, and the subtle act of being in a room but not saying anything that could be considered a political commitment. At family dinners, the girls are asked to recite the birthdays and minor scandals of every eligible cousin within a 400-mile radius. Mistake one French prince for his Spanish twin, and you're sent back to the nursery to copy out the Habsburg family tree until your hand cramps. Their reading lists are heavy on psalms, fairy tales, and the collected correspondence of relatives who married well. You overhear your youngest, barely 5, declaring that her greatest ambition is to marry a cousin with all his own teeth. It's hard to argue with that level of realism. Between lessons, the girls are shuffled between tutors for dancing, painting, and appropriate small talk. When asked what they wish for most, the answers are always careful. Peace in Europe, the health of my papa, and not to marry a man who faints at the sight of strawberries. As the years pass, the pressure grows. Portrait artists arrive with orders to capture her best features, which usually means inventing a new chin or airbrushing out an unfortunate eyelid. Matchmakers send subtle inquiries from Denmark, Prussia, or whichever principality is currently short on blue blood. The palace halls fill with a steady parade of ambassadors, all eyeing your daughters as if they're rare birds at an auction. Every compliment is scrutinized. Every invitation is a test. And every new rumor about another royal engagement sends the staff into a panic. Yet, for all the scheming and strategizing, there are moments of real tenderness. Late at night, you peek into the nursery and see your daughters whispering secrets, giggling over forbidden sweets, and plotting to run away to a convent, or at least to the kitchens. For a moment, they are just girls, barefoot, wild-haired, and blissfully unaware of the matrimonial chess game swirling around them. By morning, the game resumes. The tutors return, the gowns are refitted, and the world waits to see where the next royal daughter will be married off. But in these fleeting moments, you hold on to hope that somewhere between the betrothals, the beauty regimes, and the endless cousin counting, your daughters might find their own tiny corners of happiness. Even if that corner is, statistically, located suspiciously close to a cousin, no matter the ailment, the diagnosis is the same. It's hereditary. The cure? Bleeding, bitter tonics, and avoiding direct sunlight, lest anyone notice the family complexion. You could wake up with a fever, a mysterious rash, or a third eyelid, and the answer is always the same: blame the bloodline. The royal court physician is summoned in a flurry of urgency and indignation, bustling in with a cloak full of leeches and a prescription pad that's just a list of family names. His bedside manner is best described as mildly disappointed tutor, and his most trusted medical instrument is the raised eyebrow. Your first memory of illness is the physician waving a sprig of dried rosemary over your head and muttering, "It's to be expected, considering her mother's cousin's foot." You develop a cough? Definitely the bloodline. Chronic headaches? A little too much Spanish ancestry, I'm afraid. Even stubbed your toe on the nursery door? It runs in the family. Best stay off it until next Michaelmas. Treatments are, to put it gently, medieval. The first response is always bloodletting. The theory is simple: less blood, fewer problems. You're laid out on linen sheets, the windows thrown open to let in the fresh London air, an aromatic blend of horse manure and fog. The doctor brings out a kit of small knives and slightly worried-looking leeches. You wonder if the leeches are more nervous than you are. The procedure is swift, the results dubious, and the doctor's satisfaction palpable. Much improved, he declares, as you pale into the color of week-old cheese. When bloodletting fails to produce a miracle, it's time for tonics. The royal pharmacy shelves groan under the weight of concoctions with names like Elixir of Gentility and Noble Stomach Cordial. These are made of bitter roots, sour wines, and the occasional dash of mercury. For energy. Each draught is more ghastly than the last. You're reminded to hold your nose and think noble thoughts. The taste lingers for hours, just long enough for the court physician to return and suggest another round. If all else fails, you are prescribed rest, which means staying indoors, out of the sun, so as not to darken your skin beyond the family's preferred pale. The curtains are drawn, the fire stoked, and you're left to amuse yourself with embroidery, psalms, and the endless task of not dying before the next marriage treaty is signed. The doctor assures you it's only temporary, unless it isn't. Either way, it's the bloodline. The physician's expertise extends to diagnosing other family members too. Your brother's limp is the Windsor walk. Your mother's migraines are a feature of the Hanover side. Even your cousin's tendency to faint at loud noises is, apparently, an admirable trait, shows sensitivity, which the French admire. Every complaint becomes an inside joke among the staff. Does your ladyship wish for tea or just a bit of leeching? The chambermaid whispers, careful to keep it out of the doctor's hearing. The only real winners are the leeches, who live long, prosperous lives and occasionally become family pets. There's even a rumor that the old queen once named a particularly robust specimen after her favorite general. Meanwhile, the tonics become so legendary that enterprising footmen begin selling diluted versions to the public, promising the constitution of a royal to anyone brave or foolish enough to try. Despite his questionable results, the court physician is indispensable. He knows everyone's secrets, who bruises easily, who's allergic to goose feathers, and which side of the family can't digest cabbage. He's also an expert in public relations, crafting delicate statements like, "The princess is simply resting," when in fact, the princess has fainted spectacularly during Vespers and needs to be revived with a blast of vinegar. In the end, the diagnosis is always the same. It's not the weather, the food, or even the suspiciously green water from the royal well. It's the bloodline. You learn to wear your ailments as badges of honor. Each bout of hereditary malaise is just another step toward building royal character, and maybe, if you're lucky, avoiding another session with the leeches. Because in this family, the cure is almost always worse than the condition, but at least you can blame it on your ancestors. Every outfit is designed to flatter what the family portraits cannot. High collars, voluminous sleeves, and hats large enough to hide a minor deformity or a major one in some cases. Welcome to the dazzling world of royal fashion, where the tailors are as much illusionists as they are craftsmen, and every closet is an arsenal in the war against unfortunate genetics. Your daily dressing routine is less about personal style and more about creative concealment. A royal wardrobe is designed by committee, 1 part court etiquette, 1 part wishful thinking, and 2 parts panic after a cousin's nose goes rogue in last season's portraits. The first layer is always linen. A chemise, petticoat, and the ever-important modesty panel reinforced with extra fabric at the neckline, just in case an errant jaw tries to escape. Then comes the corset, a device engineered by someone with unresolved anger toward the entire female sex. Boned, buckled, and laced until you're gasping, it forces your spine into a posture so upright it would make a flagpole jealous. It also, conveniently, distracts from any suspicious bulges, curves, or hereditary humps that have crept in over the generations. Next, sleeves and ruffles, lots of them. The sleeves on a royal gown are less about warmth and more about optics. Billowing lace and layers of velvet draw the eye away from elbows that bend at questionable angles. For extra security, designers add embroidery in the shape of flowers, lions, or, when feeling cheeky, stylized representations of family noses. Subtle, but present. Then there's the collar, the higher the better. Stiffened with wire, lined with fur, and studded with pearls. The collar frames your face and turns every head movement into an exercise in slow-motion elegance. If you must turn quickly, the collar doubles as a shield, sparing courtiers from an unexpected encounter with the full glory of your inherited features. The showstopper, however, is always the wig. Royal wigs are feats of engineering and architectural ambition. Some tower nearly a foot high, festooned with ribbons, flowers, and occasionally small decorative birds, alive or otherwise depending on the fashion of the week. A well-placed wig can balance out an uneven jaw, obscure an off-center ear, or add a regal poof to an otherwise questionable cranium. For those particularly cursed with the family scalp, a strategic cascade of curls hides thinning patches and extra lumps with equal success. Accessories, too, serve a dual purpose: adornment and distraction. Long gloves disguise webbed fingers or double thumbs, while elaborate fans allow for a dramatic flutter to hide a sudden blush or an unfortunate nosebleed. Sashes are tied, brooches are pinned, and for especially tricky days, there's always the emergency evening veil, a sheer masterpiece designed to create an air of mystery while providing coverage from both the sun and judgmental aunties. Royal children are not spared this fashion arms race. Little princes and princesses are trussed up in velvet and lace, their awkward growth spurts padded and camouflaged by enterprising governesses with a knack for millinery. Shoes are custom-made for every foot, even the ones with an extra toe or two. And each new portrait sparks a flurry of tailoring to correct any surprises before the next family event. But for all its restrictions and discomfort, royal fashion does offer a kind of security blanket. Beneath the layers of cloth and powder, you can hide not just physical oddities, but also your nerves, your uncertainty, and the knowledge that your body is as much a product of treaties as it is of biology. Every mirror in the palace reflects not just you, but the full, glorious, genetically entangled history of your house, carefully staged, concealed, and ornamented for public consumption. At the end of the day, when the wig comes off and the collars are unhooked, you catch a glimpse of yourself, real, unvarnished, and undeniably royal. In this family, fashion is survival, camouflage, and the ultimate show of resilience. And tomorrow, you'll start all over again. Ruffles, wigs, and strategic veils at the ready for whatever family trait decides to make its royal debut. Court life is a swirl of rumors. Who's marrying whom, whose jaw is jutting a bit further this season, and which duchess is rumored to have an extra vertebra. In the rarefied air of the royal court, gossip is both a pastime and a competitive sport. If you ever feel lonely, just wait 10 minutes. Someone will surely pop by to whisper the latest about your cousins, your rivals, or, occasionally, you. The palace is a sprawling maze of polished floors and plush drapes, each one muffling 100 conversations, every alcove echoing with scandal and speculation. It's not so much high society as it is a high-stakes game of Guess Who, with hereditary oddities as the main clues. Each morning starts with the arrival of the latest letters and dispatches, carried in on silver trays by footmen who always have an ear to the ground. By breakfast, half the court already knows who was spotted limping in the rose garden, who fainted during Vespers, and which newly arrived Spanish princess is sporting a suspiciously square jaw. The real intrigue, though, simmers in the drawing rooms, where a glance can say more than a proclamation and a well-timed cough can ignite a full-blown international incident. The main event is always marriage speculation. Who will be next to the altar, and more importantly, whose children will inherit which family quirks? Bets are placed, quietly, on who will end up with the nose, the chin, or, in the case of the unfortunate Bavarian cousins, the ears. It's less about romance and more about genetic risk assessment, disguised as polite conversation over lukewarm tea. But jaws and chins aren't the only scandals. Every family has its secrets, and the palace is no exception. There are whispers about the Duke of Somewhere's daughter, rumoured to have a mysterious 12th rib, a fact hotly debated after she fainted during last year's cotillion, and her corset was cut away by 3 red-faced governesses. The court physician never confirmed or denied it. But the rumour alone has been enough to inspire 4 new portrait poses and a spate of hastily tailored evening gowns. Court etiquette only fuels the drama. At balls and banquets, everyone is watching everyone else, but pretending not to. You perfect the art of eavesdropping behind a fluttering fan or exchanging coded glances across a crowded room. One sideways look from a duchess, and suddenly half the palace is convinced she's hiding a webbed toe. The other half is convinced she's plotting a coup. Scandal at court doesn't stay contained for long. One juicy tidbit and the entire city is ablaze with talk. The royal hairdresser is the best source of information, followed closely by the pastry chef, who can recite 3 generations of marital mishaps with a side of lemon tart. And should you ever attempt to keep a secret, remember, the parrot in the dowager's apartments repeats everything it hears, especially if it involves illegitimate offspring or last week's very private nosebleed. Even the court artists aren't immune. Their job is less to paint what's there, and more to paint what people wish were there. One season, a rash of slightly elongated necks appears in every portrait. Word has it the king was hoping to distract from an epidemic of double chins. Next season, it's extra rosy cheeks. Because apparently nobody wanted to remember the year of the Great Pallor. Occasionally, the gossip turns dark, scandalous affairs, vanished cousins, or the discovery of a new family mutation. These are the stories everyone claims to deplore but listens to twice. Every family tree at court is filled with more crossed-out branches than thriving ones. Newcomers are judged on their ability to navigate this world of sideways glances and sideways genes without missing a step or growing an extra one. For a royal daughter, all this talk is both danger and armor. You learn to laugh it off, invent rumors of your own, or, on especially bold days, lean into the family oddities with a wink and a well-timed twirl. Because in a palace built on secrets, sometimes the best thing to do is put your chin up, your ruffles on, and hope the next scandal involves someone else, at least for this week. When you fall ill, which you will, the royal doctor arrives with a suitcase full of medieval optimism, your prescribed mercury, holy relics, and, if all else fails, a trip to a warm climate and a different set of cousins. There is no avoiding the sick room in royal life. Sooner or later, the combination of drafty stone corridors, ceremonial stress, and centuries of recycling the same set of chromosomes is bound to catch up with you. The first sign is usually something mild, an itchy throat, a spotty rash, or a sudden inability to walk straight after dinner. Your attendants gather like storm clouds, peering anxiously over your bed as the chief physician is summoned. He arrives with a look that says, "I've read all the ancient Greek medical texts and plan to ignore half of them." The ritual begins. The heavy curtains are drawn, not to block out light, but to keep prying eyes and family gossips at bay. Your bed is piled high with enough quilts and blankets to smother a small horse. The room smells faintly of lavender, beeswax, and terror. Within minutes, your pulse is being taken by 3 different methods, none of which involve a watch. The first cure is always bed rest. Do not move, the doctor insists, while the nurses tuck pillows under your knees, shoulders, and elbows. He consults a chart, more family tree than symptom log, and sighs deeply, concluding, "It's in the blood." You're banned from reading exciting novels, eating anything with spice, or sitting up for longer than it takes to say a Hail Mary. If you sneeze, you're given a cross to hold. If you cough, the priest is called. Next comes the bloodletting. The royal doctor's kit unfolds like a magician's trick, gleaming knives, glass cups, and a selection of leeches named after former monarchs. Bleeding is supposed to balance your humors and cleanse your spirit. You lie back as a tiny vampire does its work, watched over by your mother who mutters, "Just like her grandfather, God rest his soul." The only thing more draining than the bloodletting is the conversation. If the bleeding doesn't work, and it doesn't, the next step is a cocktail of bitter tonics and questionable powders. Mercury is the reigning favorite, guaranteed to get things moving, the doctor says, though he never specifies where or what. Laudanum is poured with abandon, chased by more prayers, and the occasional soothing story about a distant aunt who survived a similar episode by moving to Portugal and marrying a baritone. You're also presented with holy relics, a sliver of saintly bone, a piece of linen from the true cross, and a pebble allegedly blessed by the Pope. These are tucked under your pillow for protection, though you suspect they're there mostly to stop you complaining. Sometimes, if your recovery is slow or the court grows bored, a new prescription is offered: change of scenery. The English damp does her no favors, the doctor declares. Plans are made to ship you off to the Mediterranean or, for variety, to your second cousins in Austria. You swap one set of cold, drafty rooms for another, only this time with added sunburn and new dietary restrictions. Of course, none of these treatments address the real root of the problem: the family tree. But it's not polite to mention that. Instead, the sick room becomes your world. Days blur into nights. Courtiers send flowers and awkward poems. Your siblings sneak in with forbidden fruit tarts and the latest gossip: who fainted in chapel, who's betrothed, whose ears are growing suspiciously pointed. The priests and the physicians trade off shifts at your bedside. One reciting psalms, the other reciting dosages. Eventually, one of three things happens. You recover and are hailed as a miracle. Your symptoms subside just enough to shuffle back into public life. Or, if you're unlucky, you're quietly replaced in family portraits by your next eldest sister, whose complexion is more promising. Whatever the outcome, the sick room shapes you. It teaches you patience, humility, and the art of feigning gratitude for boiled turnip broth. It also teaches you the most important royal lesson of all. When in doubt, blame the weather, the French, or, if pressed, the bloodline. But never, ever blame the royal doctor, lest you end up prescribed a vacation with the Austrian cousins. Again, half the babies make it to adulthood. The other half are honored with elaborate funerals and even more elaborate explanations. The official line: delicate constitution. The unofficial line: that's what happens when your gene pool is a hot tub. In the royal nursery, every rattle comes with a side of existential dread. You are swaddled in silk, rocked by nursemaids, and serenaded by harpsichord while an entire retinue of physicians, priests, and genealogists monitor your every sneeze. In theory, you're living the high life. In practice, you're in a medieval episode of Survivor. The stakes are high. Every cradle is a miniature throne. But half of them seem to come with wheels for easy transport to the family crypt. The expectations are relentless. No sooner are you born than a full audit of your vital statistics begins. Is the fontanelle too soft? Are the lungs robust enough to make it through winter? Does your cry sound sufficiently noble? Everyone has a theory. Too much Spanish blood, not enough milk, or possibly that new nursemaid who looks suspiciously French. And so the palace becomes a battleground of superstitions and half-baked science. Feeding time is an exercise in risk management. Wet nurses are vetted with more scrutiny than ambassadors, and your feeding schedule is updated by the hour. Some babies are nursed by a parade of women, each one selected for her health, her temperament, and her lack of visible warts. If you take ill, the blame is immediate and decisive. The last nurse was too cheerful. That's never a good sign. You're promptly assigned a replacement with the emotional warmth of a rain-soaked flagstone. The room is kept at the precise temperature believed to favor the delicate constitution of royal infants, which generally means cold enough to kill germs, and half the children. Candles burn at all hours. The priest sprinkles holy water with the same frequency as the nurses change your linen. Any unexplained whimper brings in a small army of advisors, each one proposing more desperate remedies. A cold forehead? Rub it with onions. A fever? Leeches, obviously. A bout of colic? Perhaps the child needs to be held upside down in a drafty corridor. Despite the palace's best efforts, survival is never guaranteed. If you fall ill, the family mobilizes with a speed rarely seen outside of palace coups. Doctors rush in with bleeding bowls and jars of mercury. Aunt Margaret appears to tell everyone, at length, how she once survived smallpox with only a mild limp and a lifelong aversion to gooseberries. And yet, for all the expertise and prayer, fate often seems to favor the bold and the slightly less inbred. When the worst happens, royal funerals are elaborate affairs. No expense is spared. White horses, velvet drapes, and an orchestra hired for the express purpose of playing very sad but optimistic music. Official proclamations are drafted. Taken too soon, a gentle soul, a victim of the times. Behind closed doors, the unofficial explanations flow more freely. It was the Spanish nose, someone mutters. Or was it the Habsburg chin? Either way, the family tree loses a branch, and the search for new matches begins again before the nursery has even been tidied. For the survivors, every passing day is counted as a victory. The healthy ones grow sturdy on porridge, boiled beef, and the occasional miracle. The unlucky ones are immortalized in portraits that hang in chilly corridors, always painted to look just a little bit older, a little more hopeful than they ever had a chance to be. By the time you outgrow the cradle, you've survived more illnesses, treatments, and superstitions than most adults. Your reward? A place at the royal table and a future as either a marriage pawn or a cautionary tale. And so, the nursery empties, the portraits accumulate, and the royal family continues. Slightly smaller, considerably more anxious, and ever hopeful that the next baby will inherit nothing more dangerous than the family taste for boiled cabbage. Because in the end, surviving infancy in the royal nursery isn't about luck. It's about playing the genetic Hunger Games and winning by a nose. Literally, you're encouraged to keep going, just in case. Spare children are essential. Heirs are fragile. And you never know when a rare blood disorder might clear the line of succession overnight. In the royal household, producing an heir isn't just a duty, it's the family's only reliable insurance policy. And like all insurance policies, one is never enough. The entire kingdom holds its breath for the announcement of a royal birth. But the celebrations are always tinged with anxiety. After all, history has shown that fate, illness, and the occasional suspicious staircase are more common than a healthy, long-lived firstborn. The moment the first child's wail echoes through the palace, everyone from the kitchen staff to the archbishop lets out a sigh of relief. The dynasty continues, but the congratulatory hugs barely last a week before the pressure begins again. Another, please. The nursery is expanded. The royal wet nurses are doubled. The court physician stocks up on bitters, bandages, and a fresh batch of leeches, because you never know when a robust heir will suddenly come down with a touch of the Windsor wobble. There is a running joke in the court. The first child is for the throne. The second is for peace of mind. The third is for the family portrait. The rest are for Europe. The truth behind the joke is that heirs are, by nature and nurture, astonishingly breakable. Infant mortality rates are sky high. Thanks to a lethal cocktail of dodgy genetics, medieval medicine, and a household diet composed mostly of boiled turnips and good intentions, even a mild fever can send the entire palace into panic mode, and a persistent cough triggers a week of fasting, prayer, and just a precautionary exorcism. Meanwhile, the spare is raised as a backup battery, a sort of living plan B, and everyone knows it. From the moment of their christening, the spare is gently but unmistakably reminded of their role. At lessons, they're seated a little further from the tutor. At meals, they're nudged down the table, politely out of frame for any official portrait that doesn't specifically require proof of genetic backup. The spare is expected to be healthy, cheerful, and above all, ready, just in case history requires a hasty substitution. This isn't just about boys either. Royal daughters quickly find themselves cast as spares to their older sisters. Their futures mapped out as backup brides or emergency abbesses, all contingent on the survival and fertility of the firstborn. Whenever a new child arrives, bets are placed on how many seasons it will take before some mysterious, delicate constitution makes the order of succession a moving target. As the children grow, so do the complications. Heirs are wrapped in velvet and swaddled in protocol. Spares get a little more freedom and, if they're lucky, a hobby. chess is encouraged. Always useful to know your way around a game of pawns. Court gossip swirls around every cold, bruise, or cough. Did the heir's rash mean an allergy? Or an early ticket to the monastery? Did the spare's healthy colouring suggest a better genetic mix? Or just that he ate less cabbage than the rest? And when tragedy strikes, as it so often does, the machinery of royal life shifts overnight. The spare is thrust into the spotlight, wardrobe updated, tutors reassigned, and prayers for robust health are redoubled. The cycle resumes, one heir for hope, one spare for insurance, and a quiet understanding that the future of the realm may depend on whoever can dodge smallpox the longest. In the end, the royal nursery becomes a training ground not just for rulers, but for survivors. The walls echo with lullabies, laughter, and the occasional nervous prophecy. Heirs and spares grow up side by side, forever entwined in the precarious dance of succession. Because in the world of royalty, having a backup plan isn't just sensible, it's absolutely essential, especially when your greatest family tradition is surviving your own bloodline. Sometimes, your daughters are shipped off to other royal families. The hope, maybe fresh air and German water, will do what English blood can't. This is the great unspoken secret of the royal marriage market. Sometimes, the best way to handle a surplus of heirs, spares, and delicately constituted daughters is to send them on a diplomatic vacation that just happens to last the rest of their lives. Packing up a princess and sending her to the chilly courts of Prussia or the sun-drenched palaces of Italy is as much about political strategy as it is about hopeful genetics. A little foreign air, a dash of unfamiliar cuisine, and, if all goes well, the new in-laws won't notice the tendency toward mysterious rashes until it's too late to send her back. The preparations for departure are a spectacle all their own. Tutors are hastily brought in to teach the basics of a new language, enough to say, "Pleased to meet you, where is the chapel?" And "My family jaw is perfectly normal, thank you." Chests are packed with enough lace, gloves, and sensible undergarments to survive a decade in a climate no one at court has actually researched. And, of course, there are the gifts, portraits, embroidered handkerchiefs, and at least one jewel borrowed from the family vault, with strict instructions not to lose it in a fountain. The tearful farewell is conducted with great ceremony. Mothers dab at their eyes with lace-edged handkerchiefs. Fathers give ponderous advice about upholding family honor, and siblings whisper last-minute warnings about the local cuisine. The family chaplain prays for a safe journey, a fruitful marriage, and though he never says it outright, a bit of luck in the gene pool department. You ride away in a gilded carriage, waved off by an audience that is, in equal parts, relieved and envious. Arriving at your new home, you're greeted by a welcoming committee of distant relatives, eager to inspect their new acquisition. The language barrier is immediately obvious, but court etiquette is the same everywhere. Smile, curtsy, and do your best not to faint during introductions. Your new mother-in-law offers you a tour of the palace. Mostly a list of rooms you'll never be allowed to enter. Your husband-to-be is presented like a prized racehorse, and you size up his chin, his walk, and his tolerance for boiled cabbage. Life in a foreign court is a balancing act. You're expected to absorb local customs, charm the nobility, and provide heirs with as little drama as possible. At first, you're the new sensation. The English princess with the lovely hair and mysterious tendency to faint when served pickled herring. The court gossips whisper about your accent, your wardrobe, and whether your children will inherit your family's legendary complexion or its legendary appetite for fainting. Meanwhile, your family sends regular letters full of updates, advice, and gently worded reminders to keep your options open when it comes to baptismal names. Over time, the novelty fades, and you settle into your new routine, morning prayers in a language you barely understand, endless dinners of unfamiliar food, and the daily challenge of remembering which cousin is married to which ambassador. You write home, describing your new life in the most optimistic terms possible, all the while wondering if your mother was right about the German winters or the Italian springs. If you're lucky, you find small comforts, a sympathetic maid, a pet spaniel who listens without judgment, or a sister-in-law who secretly speaks English and shares your allergy to turnips. And, sometimes, the strategy works. The foreign air invigorates you. The water is not nearly as alarming as warned, and your children grow up with a hybrid vigor that the family portraits back home quietly envy. Other times, you find yourself exchanging polite but pointed letters with your old governess about recurring symptoms and the local physician's interesting theories. Still, the arrangement is mutually beneficial. Your home court boasts of another successful alliance. Your new court gains a dash of imported glamour, and the family gene pool gets a tentative shot of diversity. At the very least, you can always claim your children's quirks are continental, which is royal code for not entirely our fault. In the grand chess game of European royalty, exporting your problems abroad is the closest thing to a fresh start anyone ever gets. By now, the family portraits all look eerily similar. The artists have given up. The only difference between you and your cousin is the shape of the wig and the number of ribbons. Decades of royal portraiture have a strange effect on both sitter and artist. The first time you sit for a painting, it's an event. Flowers in the hair, best gown brought out of storage, and all the anxious hope that your good side will finally find its way into the family archives. But after the 7th, the 11th, the 23rd, the process becomes mechanical. The artist sets up, yawns discreetly, and you slide into a pose you could hold in your sleep, which, on especially long days, you sometimes do. These portraits are not simply for vanity. Each one is a diplomatic postcard, a statement to the world and to every royal cousin. Yes, we're all still here. And yes, we all still have the jaw. They're also a handy method for matchmakers, genealogists, and armchair physicians to play guess the syndrome. At first, the painters make an effort, subtle shading for cheekbones, delicate brushwork to minimize certain features. But as the generations blur together, the need for subtlety disappears. After all, how much difference can a powdered wig really make? You begin to notice a certain sameness creeping into the gallery. It's not just the family noses, but the tilt of the head, the slightly anxious eyes, the strategic positioning of hands, always over the stomach, as if hoping to cover a secret or two. The artists seem to rotate the same three expressions: mild optimism, serene resignation, and the universal look of, "Can I go home now?" Even the family dogs look tired. Somewhere along the line, you realize your cousin's portrait from last season could easily be passed off as your own, if not for the telltale extra ribbon. After a while, the palace walls turn into a kind of royal Where's Waldo. Guests are invited to guess who is who, with bonus points for identifying the year by the number of feathers in the hat or the width of the collar. That's Princess Charlotte. Or possibly Sophia, someone ventures, peering up at a particularly crowded canvas. You can tell by the way she's holding her fan. Or maybe by the mole. Unless that's just a paint smudge. As each portrait is completed, the painter presents it with a mix of pride and apology. "Your Grace, I believe I've captured your essence," he says, unveiling a work that, if you're lucky, shows only the most flattering angle. If not, you might discover you've inherited not just your mother's jaw, but also her ability to look mildly alarmed even while sitting perfectly still. The unveiling is attended by a select audience who nod politely and say, "How very royal." The portraits are then added to the ever-growing gallery, where they quietly swap places with earlier versions as political tides change and family favorites rise and fall. For the next generation, these paintings become both treasure and warning. Young princes and princesses parade past them on rainy afternoons, each one trying to spot which ancestor they resemble and which traits to pray they'll skip. The resemblance is often uncanny, sometimes unsettling, and always a reminder that in this family, individuality is something best hidden under a very large hat. Every so often, a foreign ambassador will tour the gallery and, after several polite minutes, whisper to his aide, "Which one is the current princess?" The aide shrugs. Nobody really knows. The portraits might as well be mirrors, reflecting back a long, slow game of genetic telephone. In the end, these painted faces are less a record of individuals than a testament to dynastic persistence. They are the family's greatest illusion, a seamless, unbroken chain of jawlines, noses, and ribbons, all looking serenely into the future, as if daring the next artist to spot the difference. And in this palace, the real answer is always, you can't. If you survive into your 40s, you're a legend. You spend your days surrounded by portraits of children, grandchildren, and more medical curiosities than a Victorian freak show. The years creep by, and with every new candle on your birthday cake, or, more accurately, bland ceremonial fruit loaf, you defy the odds. In the world of royal daughters, making it to 40 is less about luck and more about a combination of stubbornness, a strong constitution, and perhaps a touch of divine indifference. While others fall to fevers, childbirth, or the mysterious ailments listed in the family medical ledger, general debility, excessive nostalgia, sudden toe loss, you persist, older, wiser, and, yes, achier with each passing season. Now you're the dowager, the matriarch, the grand dame in the corner of every family portrait. Always seated, always shrouded in several layers of black silk and family history. The court treats you with reverence, as if you're both a living relic and a cautionary tale. You preside over tea tables and family councils, dispensing advice, herbal remedies, and the occasional withering glance at an uppity granddaughter. Your days follow a reliable rhythm. Mornings begin with a slow shuffle past a wall of family portraits. There's cousin George, mustache grander than his intellect. Your eldest daughter, who married well and writes once a year, and a vast gallery of children and grandchildren, each painted to look their healthiest and most unrecognizable. Some mornings you find yourself counting how many are left, how many have vanished quietly into convents, distant courts, or simply delicate decline. Meals are quieter now. The table is set for many, but only a handful remain. You drink thin broth and reminisce about roast feasts of the past, when half the family was present and the other half was at least alive enough to send apologies. The conversation is mostly about the weather, church festivals, and which distant cousin is rumored to be engaged, ill, or exiled. You keep a mental tally of which maladies are making the rounds. Gout in Bavaria, weak chests in Hanover, mysterious fits in Portugal. The palace staff, for their part, treat you with cautious awe. You've outlived 3 doctors, 5 royal chaplains, and at least 2 rival dowagers. Servants tiptoe past your chambers, and when you cough, 3 different people bring hot water bottles before you even finish. The family physician checks in twice a day, offering tinctures, herbal teas, and the latest quackery from France. You humor him by sipping politely, knowing full well that nothing can cure old age, except, well, nothing. Old age brings perspective, and you've learned to see the humor in your situation. You can recite, from memory, every ridiculous cause of death in your immediate circle. Choked on marzipan, fell from a sedan chair, fainted after a surprise in the rose garden. No story is too embarrassing, and the best ones are retold on stormy nights, when the wind rattles the windows and the fire is burning low. Yet, for all the aches and losses, there is a peculiar peace. You're the family's institutional memory, the living archive of scandals, triumphs, and mishaps. The younger generation tiptoes in for your blessing or, more often, your advice. You teach them how to spot a draft in the dining hall, which herbal tea helps most with digestion, and how to tell whether a suitor's genealogy is truly impeccable. At night, you wander the halls in your memory, tracing the laughter, the heartbreak, and the long, tangled story of your bloodline. The portraits watch you back, some smiling, some grim, most with that unmistakable jaw. You fall asleep each night, knowing you've outlasted more than anyone expected, outliving your offspring, outlasting the bloodline, and ensuring that, at least in this palace, the family story continues for one more improbable chapter. Death in the royal family means one last public performance. You're laid to rest with ancestors, uncles, and at least 3 former suitors who are also inconveniently related. The final act in a royal daughter's saga is as theatrical as anything that came before. The moment you breathe your last, the palace leaps into a well-rehearsed dance of grief and protocol. Mourning banners appear on every window, the church bells toll, and official proclamations are drafted before anyone's had a chance to change into black. There is no such thing as a quiet exit in the world of royalty. Even your death must be staged for an audience. The mourning period is, in theory, about solemn reflection. In reality, it's a strange combination of chaos and committee meetings. Distant cousins arrive in droves, each one eyeing your jewelry collection and trying to remember if they're technically owed a brooch, a title, or just the privilege of sitting up front at the funeral service. The more ambitious ones start the inheritance dance early, making pointed remarks about family heirlooms and recounting childhood stories that conveniently involve promises of someday. All this will be yours. Meanwhile, the court lawyers descend, armed with scrolls, stamps, and a remarkable ability to prolong the reading of a will for maximum suspense. Preparations for your royal funeral begin at once. Your body is washed, dressed, and positioned in state, a process involving more starch, lace, and rosaries than you ever wore in life. The embalmers do their best, but even they can't hide a lifetime of bad genetics. You're placed in a coffin carved from the finest oak, lined with velvet, and sprinkled with enough lavender to stun an ox. All around you, flowers pile up, some sent by relatives who only met you once, others from political rivals eager to demonstrate just how sincerely they mourn your passing. Then comes the viewing. The palace's great hall is filled with courtiers, clergy, and a selection of mourners who seem to enjoy the refreshments more than the eulogies. The court portraitist sets up his easel for one last sketch, as if hoping to capture the fleeting beauty of a royal at rest. A delicate jaw softened by candlelight, hands artfully arranged to show off the best inherited rings. The living family assembles for a final portrait, all in black, expressions hovering somewhere between sorrow and calculation. After all, succession doesn't wait for the tears to dry. The funeral procession itself is a grand affair. Black horses, veiled widows, and enough organ music to last until Judgment Day. The streets are lined with people, most of them craning their necks for a glimpse of the famous family nose one last time. The bishop gives a long-winded sermon about faith, virtue, and the strength of bloodlines, conveniently skipping over the more scandalous details. As you're laid to rest in the family crypt, the final act unfolds with remarkable efficiency. The crypt itself is crowded, an eternal slumber party with ancestors, great-uncles, and the odd former suitor all packed together in stone niches. Names, titles, and familial connections are carved into the walls, creating a kind of marble crossword puzzle that future genealogists will puzzle over for centuries. There is a certain comfort in the familiarity. One last gathering, one last reunion, one last opportunity for the family tree to fold in on itself. Back upstairs, the real work of inheritance begins. Titles are redistributed, lands are claimed, and family treasures disappear into private pockets, with a speed that would make even the williest courtier blush. But amid the bustle, there is genuine sorrow too. For all the plotting and politicking, the family is a little smaller, the palace a little quieter, and the endless saga of royal daughters has reached its inevitable, if not exactly peaceful conclusion. And so, your story is woven into the tapestry of the dynasty. A portrait on the wall, a name in the ledger, a memory among the marble. You may be gone, but you've left behind a legacy of jawlines, scandals, and stories that will keep the gossips busy for generations to come. It's not a bad way to be remembered. Really, not bad at all. As history marches forward, your children's children inherit the titles, the jewels, and the DNA. Future generations will look back at your portrait and ask, was it worth it? While a distant cousin polishes the family jaw. Legacy is a tricky business for a royal daughter. On the surface, it looks impressive. Titles passed down like ornate heirlooms, castles standing proud against the weather, and vaults lined with jewels that glint in candlelight long after your portrait's eyes have dulled. Your descendants bear your name, your crest, and, more than likely, a few of your more distinctive features: the family jaw, the nose, the propensity for fainting at garden parties, all immortalized, if not celebrated. But for all the splendor, there's an unspoken question hanging over every banquet, every christening, every midnight whisper in the nursery. What did it cost? Did the relentless matchmaking, the calculated alliances, and the endless cousin counting secure a golden future, or simply polish the bars on the world's most elegant genetic hamster wheel? The answer is written not just in marble, but in the flesh and bone of those who come after. Your children's children face the same pressures you did. They learn the family history alongside their Latin declensions. They grow up tiptoeing through galleries of ancestors who seem to watch with both pride and warning. The pattern repeats: strategic marriages, hopeful portraits, and always the balancing act between tradition and disaster. In time, the dynasty's great achievements begin to blur with its quirks. The victories and treaties are celebrated, but so are the scandals. Sometimes more so. Future generations tell stories of the princess who danced through 3 courts before breakfast, or the prince who could recite the names of all his cousins but not his own children. And then, of course, there are the family oddities, those peculiar traits that make royal genealogists both shudder and salivate. A thumb that bends backwards, a jaw that juts out defiantly, a legendary resistance to onions or daylight. It's not just bloodlines that are passed down, but habits, secrets, and jokes. The family tree is a living document, branches woven with ribbons of memory and regret. Sometimes it feels more like a wreath, circular, tightly woven, and, in the end, impossible to unravel. Each new generation is tasked with carrying the story forward, adding their own twist to the ever-growing legend. Meanwhile, the world outside changes. Monarchies fall, republics rise, and castles become tourist attractions. What once was power is now spectacle. What once was private agony is fodder for historians and documentary filmmakers. Still, the family persists, clinging to its legacy like a badge of honor and a security blanket. Cousins gather for weddings and funerals, eyeing each other's jawlines and wondering which traits will carry on and which will, mercifully, fade away. Somewhere, a schoolchild stares at your portrait in a chilly gallery, trying to imagine your life. Did you love? Were you happy? Did you ever dream of leaving it all behind for a simple cottage and a spouse who wasn't also a second cousin? The answer, as always, is complicated, stitched into every ruffle, every ribbon, every faded signature in the family ledger. The royal legacy is both a triumph and a tragedy, a monument to endurance, stubbornness, and the absurd lengths families will go to stay on top. Maybe it's not quite a tree. Maybe it's a wreath. Either way, it endures, looping endlessly into the future, a tangle of glory, grief, and genetics. And whether history remembers you as a heroine or a cautionary tale, at least your portrait's still hanging, jaw and all, keeping watch over the next brave branch. You've outlived your husband, your rivals, and most of your original teeth. Now you get to enjoy retirement as a dowager queen, complete with endless black silk, a shadowy corner in the palace, and unsolicited medical advice for every young bride in the family. The good news? You finally get a room to yourself. The bad news? It's next to the draftiest hallway in Windsor. Becoming a dowager queen is a peculiar sort of victory lap. After decades spent maneuvering through court intrigue, strategic pregnancies, and the endless dangers of dining with relatives, you're finally at the top of the royal food chain, at least until a particularly enthusiastic grandchild or scheming daughter-in-law decides it's time to redecorate the family hierarchy. The world assumes you'll slip quietly into dignified obscurity. Instead, you become the palace's resident ghost, haunting the halls in swathes of black crepe, an ever-present reminder that no one escapes family duty, not even in retirement. Your days begin early. The sun is barely up before your first cup of chicory coffee is brought in by a maid who treats you with the reverence usually reserved for saints and very old cheese. Breakfast is a careful affair. Toast, boiled eggs, and an elaborate arrangement of pills, herbal, pharmaceutical, and occasionally just sugar, to keep the apothecary on his toes. You spend mornings shuffling through old letters, court decrees, and invitations to events you have no intention of attending. Sometimes you gaze at your own portrait, remembering a time when you could stand for 3 hours without your knees plotting mutiny. As a dowager, you wield the power of experience, selective memory, and the right to issue unsolicited advice at any gathering. Young brides are paraded through your drawing room, nervously adjusting their veils and seeking approval. You offer them cryptic wisdom. Never trust a man who offers you Spanish lace or advice about turnip soup, and send them off with a pinch on the cheek and a reminder to always keep spare-smelling salts handy. You know every secret passage in the palace, every scandal that was swept under the tapestry, and which recipes to avoid on feast days if you wish to see the next sunrise. Your wardrobe is a monument to both tradition and practicality. Layers of mourning silk and widow's weeds, brooches shaped like weeping willows, and a signature string of black pearls, one for every relative you've survived. These layers serve as both insulation and armor, protecting you from both Windsor's legendary drafts and the pointed barbs of younger queens angling for your place by the fire. Afternoons drift by in a haze of gentle bickering, strategic napping, and keeping a running commentary on the medical condition of every member of the family. The prince looks peaked, you note, and the princess walks with a limp. Reminds me of her uncle's unfortunate arch. If there's a wedding, you're front and center, glowering in the official portraits. If there's a christening, you pinch the baby's cheeks and declare it sturdy enough for this family. Your opinion is always sought, if not always followed. After all, it's hard to argue with someone who's lived through 3 epidemics, 2 coups, and an unfortunate outbreak of hereditary nosebleeds. But even the dowager queen's power has limits. Your room, though private, is perilously close to the north wind, and the palace staff have a habit of storing spare chamber pots just outside your door. Sometimes you eavesdrop on younger royals plotting their next move, only to fall asleep mid-scheme, your lap full of letters and half-finished embroidery. Still, there is a strange satisfaction in this late chapter. You are the family memory, the living ledger of every mistake and triumph, and the only one who remembers when the family jaw was less pronounced and the gout less widespread. You have outlasted rivals, survived fashion disasters, and navigated the pitfalls of royal love and loss. The palace creaks with history, and you are its last, stubborn echo. As dusk settles and the halls grow quiet, you nestle into your shawls, knowing you've earned every ache, every draft, and every sideways look from the young and restless. In the end, being a dowager queen isn't just about retirement, it's about being proof that, with enough resilience, a sturdy constitution, and a talent for napping through family drama, you really can survive anything. Royal life throws your way, even if it's just another cold wind from the north. As a royal daughter, you're expected to smile politely while your cousin tries juggling live ferrets or your half-brother debuts his new lute opera. The audience? half the court, and 3 bored spaniels. Your job? Clap encouragingly, and pretend you don't see the Duke's lazy eye drifting toward the pudding. If you ever wondered what passed for entertainment in the candlelit world of royal courts, brace yourself. It's a spectacle equal parts boredom and farce, with a dash of hereditary chaos thrown in for good measure. Evenings at court aren't glamorous soirees so much as forced variety shows, where every noble tries their hand at being interesting, with varying degrees of success, and sometimes minor injury. The jesters are the warm-up act. Dressed in bells and questionable taste, they caper about with riddles, pratfalls, and the occasional fire-breathing display. Provided the court physician is nearby, with a damp cloth, their jokes are carefully curated, nothing too scandalous, nothing that might upset a visiting ambassador, and certainly nothing about the royal jaw. If the jester is having a good night, someone might snort into their mead. If not, it's a long hour of forced chuckles and pained applause. Then come the masks, elaborate, hours, long spectacles where everyone from duchesses to stable boys dons uncomfortable costumes and recites lines they learned yesterday. Plots usually revolve around ancient Greek myths, the triumph of virtue, or the surprisingly complex drama of turnip farming. If you're unlucky, you get a starring role. If you're very unlucky, you're paired with the cousin who once fainted at the sight of sheep and has never recovered his sense of timing. The true highlight, however, is the family talent show, an ordeal that no royal daughter can avoid. This is where courtly dignity takes a back seat to familial ambition. Your half-brother is convinced he's the next Orpheus and insists on debuting a new lute opera every other week. You smile supportively as he plucks out a 12-minute epic about the Battle of Agincourt, out of tune and off-key, but performed with such confidence that even the tapestry weavers try not to laugh. Cousin Beatrice claims her specialty is interpreted dance. What this means in practice is flailing around the hall to the sound of 2 harpsichords and a triangle, creating a spectacle so abstract that even the family parrot looks concerned. Your youngest sister recites poetry, her own, which features a suspicious number of lines about headaches, lace, and the cruelty of velvet corsets. The spaniels, mercifully, sleep through most of it, occasionally snoring loud enough to cover a missed note or dropped ferret. But not all court entertainment is so homegrown. Traveling troupes occasionally make the rounds, eager to impress the crown. Acrobats flip across the parquet floor. Magicians produce coins from the royal earlobes. And, once, a particularly daring fire-eater accidentally sets a tapestry smouldering, prompting a stampede of bored courtiers suddenly animated by the possibility of real excitement. Throughout it all, your task is the same. Look delighted, clap enthusiastically, and never, under any circumstances, let your expression betray boredom or bewilderment. Court etiquette is very clear. If you're not enjoying yourself, at least look like you're about to enjoy yourself any moment now. You develop the royal skill of the polite smile, a rictus grin that says, "How fascinating," even as your mind is wandering toward tomorrow's embroidery lesson or the rumor of a new shipment of French chocolates in the kitchens. Sometimes, the entertainment goes off script. A juggler's ferret escapes, triggering a minor riot among the spaniels. The Duke's lazy eye actually does drift toward the pudding, which topples dramatically onto the bishop's lap. And for one glorious moment, everyone is united in real laughter. Genuine and unscripted. A reminder that, beneath all the ruffles and titles, this is still a family, oddities and all. So you applaud, you smile, and you endure. Because if you can survive court entertainments, you can survive anything. Lute operas, interpretive dance, and, perhaps, the next round of talent waiting in the wings. As you drift off tonight, wrapped in the softness of your own blankets and the sweet anonymity of your unroyal DNA, take a moment to appreciate the modern wonders around you. Hot running water, ibuprofen, and a family tree that doesn't double as a game of genetic roulette. We've wandered through the candlelit corridors of palaces, peeked behind brocade curtains, and tiptoed around family trees that look more like tightly knotted wreaths. We've seen royal daughters, brave wedding altars, and family portraits parade in layers of velvet and powdered wigs, and survive every oddball custom and medical mishap history could throw at them, all in the name of dynastic duty. It wasn't easy being England's royal daughter. It meant living under the ever-watchful eyes of the court, saying yes to proposals from men who looked suspiciously familiar, and carrying the burden of both crown and chromosome. For every grand title and gleaming jewel, there was a matching dose of hereditary surprise, questionable medical treatment, and, let's be honest, a jawline that could open cans. But despite the family drama, the ghostly ancestors, and the sheer absurdity of it all, these women endured. They navigated a world where their marriages were mapped out before their first steps, and where every birthday was an awkward reminder that someone in the family was also their uncle. Through it all, they laughed, schemed, danced, and somehow kept the royal show going, generation after generation. So tonight, as you sink into your own bed, free from itchy wigs, cousinly courtships, and pigeon-based medicine, whisper a quiet thank you to the royal daughters of England. Their struggles, their oddities, and their very stubbornness are woven into history, reminding us that survival is a family tradition, and a little absurdity never hurt anyone. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with laughter, lineage charts that actually make sense, and not a single ghost with a third arm. Good night.